Hello, everybody. To those of you joining us live, thanks for making the time to join us. And for those of you listening to a recording, thanks for your interest. My name is Martin Cowan. I'm commercial editor for T-News. I'm moderating today's webinar, which we're bringing to you with Mitek Systems. I've got my colleague, Nick Vivian, editorial director, no less, who's helping me out in the background. And we're here today to talk about digital identity verification in travel. And before I introduce the panelists, I'll just introduce the topic in its broadest sense and give you a bit of context. T-News, as you probably know, we've been covering travel tech for nearly 10 years now, and we really believe that our editorial and commercial content is there to help readers understand current and future trends, and not only understand the current and future trends, but also in a way that makes them do their jobs better. And that's not really a plug as such, it's basically what we do. So digital identity verification is one of the future trends we're looking at. We really want our readers to know about it in its early stages in travel. We think it will be an integral part of travel and hospitality pretty soon. And as I said, we just want to share our insight and intelligence with our readers. So as I said, webinar sponsored by Mitek. We worked with them earlier this year to produce one of our T-News reports, which is the title Digital Identity Verification Key to New Digital Travel Services. We think, modestly, correct us if we're wrong, that this is one of the first pieces of work which outlines the use cases for digital identity verification across a number of segments in travel, from peer-to-peer, hotels, car rentals, airlines, loyalty schemes. If you haven't read it, we'll share a link with you after the webinar. It's free to download and it's fairly good, he says. So the top line reason why digital identity verification in travel is starting to make its presence felt is that, travel has embraced digital more than other verticals and is pretty well advanced in its digital transformation. I mean, most travel firms, sellers, suppliers, intermediaries, well on the road to digital transformation, and sort of moved into digital transformation 2.0 and now looking at mobile transformation. And that's all, as we know, because of the continuing development around smartphone technology. I'm based in the UK. I haven't seen the global consumer-facing marketing for Apple's iPhone X, but in the UK at least, it's all about Face ID. Using a selfie rather than a passcode or fingerprint to open your phone, and it's a really clear example of how advanced and secure facial recognition software has become, and it's also a sign that facial recognition is becoming mainstream. When Apple does it, most people follow. But looping back to specifically within travel, digital identification is another layer of authentication, and that involves using the camera's smartphone to authenticate an official government-issued document. This is all done in real time, and then you correlate the image on the ID document with a selfie taken immediately afterwards. And by verifying that the document holder is the person who's taking the selfie, it just opens up a whole bunch of use cases, some but not all, some of which are mentioned in the T-News report, but there's a whole bunch of other use cases around. And of course, this all happens seamlessly and instantly in seconds, because as we all know, on the mobile, user experience is paramount. So this, very sophisticated process has to take place in a matter of seconds, as I said, because that's how mobile works. Okay, so this would probably be a good point at which to introduce our panelists, each of whom has a slightly different take on the theory and practice of digital identity verification in travel. And the fact that the panelists have all got a different take just reinforces our belief that, digital identity verification will resonate across the entire industry in many and varied ways. Okay, so let me start by introducing Steve Craig. He's Director of Product and Experience for today's sponsor, Mitek Systems. They're one of the leaders in the identity verification space. We're pleased to be working with Mitek, to fly the flag for the adoption of digital identity verification in travel. I mean, it works with a lot of businesses in the financial services sector, and the homepage of its website says that it works with more than 5,900 businesses across North America and Europe. So they clearly know what they're on about when it comes to identity verification. Looking forward to bringing that into travel. Okay, next we have Virginie Thrain, who's Head of Traveller Identification for Amadeus. Sure that a T-News audience needs no introduction to Amadeus. Operates globally across most verticals, distribution and IT. Virginie works in corporate strategy, particularly interested in how airlines and airports can work together more efficiently and effectively. And finally, we're very pleased to welcome Rajiv Kaul, who's Managing Director of Accenture Technology. He's joining us today because he's working closely with the World Economic Forum on its Known Traveller Digital Identity project, which I will refer to as Known Traveller from now on because that's a bit of a mouthful. Known Traveller is looking at ways to make travel seamless and secure, a bit of a focus around borders, but the seamlessness and security also applies through the entire travel value chain, booking, check-in, arrival, trips, the whole value chain. Okay, one more thing just before I hand over to the panelists for a more detailed introduction about who they are, what they do, a couple of housekeeping points. We'll run some polls during the webinar, one of which is about to happen shortly. So it'd be great if you could respond when prompted. But probably more importantly is we really want attendees to get involved. We really want to bring the digital identity verification conversation to our readership. So use the question box on the right hand side of your screen to ask panelists any questions. You can even ask me some questions if you want. We want this to be as interactive and as engaging as possible. And just to let you know, we'll try to ask as many questions as we have time for, but if we don't get around to asking your specific questions, we'll let the panelists know and encourage them to get in touch with you independently. Okay, so let's just kick off with a very sort of quick poll around digital identity verification. Just wondering, fairly simple question, have you ever used digital identity verification when making a travel purchase? As I said, it's quite a simple poll to start off with. Yes or no. So be interesting to see. I mean, digital identity verification does have use cases in travel, but it's not as widespread as it's going to be in 5 to 10 years. So I'm just interested to see from our audience how many of you have actually used digital identity verification for travel. Okay. Have we got the results, Nick? Okay, so yes, 30% yes, 71% no. That's fairly interesting. I thought it might have been lower, but then maybe that again, as I often say, regular listeners to the T News webinars, we have an articulate and tech literate audience. So maybe our 29% reflects the fact that we're all techies, and maybe if it was just a general audience, it would be less. Okay, so we've got 29% of you who've made a travel purchase using digital identity verification. What about financial services? And again, this might be more of a US-based thing, but Nick, if you could launch the other poll, have you ever used digital identity verification in financial services? Again, response is fairly obvious, yes or no. My instinct is that it will probably be slightly higher on the yes, just in light of the fact that, as I said, we're a sort of B2B tech audience. We're listening and reading T News because we're into tech, and we use tech across all our lives, all aspects of our lives, and that briefly came up as 54% and 46%. Okay, so that's quite a good start. So we've got a sort of base level of knowledge around digital identity verification. Quite a lot of you are using it for, more than half of you are using it for financial services, and sort of 3 out of 10 of you are using it for travel. So that's quite a good way to start. So Steve, over to you. Let's drill down a bit deeper into what Mitek does, but maybe just, what's your, initial response to those poll results?
Hi, Martin, and
Hi.
Good morning, good afternoon to everyone. Initial response is it falls in line with our expectation. I think in the travel vertical, we're starting to see more activity around the digital identity verification, and of course in financial services where people have been opening accounts through web and through mobile for some time. Certainly that technology has proliferated quite a bit. So it falls in line with our expectation, certainly.
Okay, good. So the floor is yours. Maybe, as I said, drill down a bit deeper into the specifics of what Mitek's digital identity verification approach to travel is.
Sure. Yeah, I'll kick it off. Thanks for the introduction earlier, Martin. As Martin mentioned, my name is Steve Craig. I'm a director of product at Mitek. My background is primarily in software, mobile, software as a service. Mitek is in the financial services industry, and I've personally worked with financial services for most of my career. My responsibility at Mitek spans mobile SDKs, our mobile app strategy, digital user experiences. I'm also responsible for product direction for our MyTech Labs organization, which is our focus on machine learning and artificial intelligence technology to assist with the verification process. I'm also a frequent traveler myself, so I've been through quite the gauntlet, both domestically and internationally. So I have quite a bit of input on the travel side from an end user, so to speak. Now, MyTech, if you're not familiar with MyTech, we're a global leader in mobile capture and identity verification. We're a public company, so you could find us on the NASDAQ. We have offices all around the world, though. Our headquarters, which I'm speaking from today, is in San Diego. We have an office in London and also the Amsterdam area. And as a part of our acquisition of eCarVision in Spain, we now have an office in Barcelona. So quite a bit of travel across those locations. You've likely used MyTech technology, though. Our flagship product is Mobile Deposit. So if you've ever deposited a check via your smartphone in any of the major banks and many of the other smaller community banks, they use MyTech technology typically for both the front-end capture of the check as well as the back-end processing. We're now well over 1 billion in terms of the deposited transactions. Our technology is in quite a few organizations. We're well over 5,000 organizations using our technology at about 70 million end users in terms of impact technologically. Now, that's a lot of people going through check deposit and identity verification. Our expertise in travel is connected to our expertise in identity documents. Travel is one of the industries that uses those quite frequently. And so we have knowledge of not just the U.S. market, but a global market of the identity documents, passports, driver's licenses from around the world. And MyTech's approach to any of our engagements with customers, if you work with us, we don't see ourselves as a vendor. We see ourselves as a partner. So as we work with companies in the travel space, we want to make sure goals are being hit and that the kind of key performance indicators that you've set are achieved. For the purposes of today's discussion, I'm going to focus on two products. One is our Mobile Fill product, which is all about fast and accurate data extraction from identity documents. This is typically in onboarding or pre-fill use cases where the end user just needs to supply some pertinent details in a form. The second product that is really the meat of the discussion is Mobile Verify. That's our identity verification product that assists with digital identity verification process. And as Martin mentioned, that process is real time. It's instantaneous. It's done on the mobile device just after a few pictures, a front of the document, back of the document, if it's an ID card or driver's license, a selfie, and then we handle all the processing from there for the end user. What we're trying to accomplish with that is both an easy user experience, but also making sure that we've got trust. And trust is a theme for a lot of the conversation today. So I'm very happy to be on this panel and looking forward to the intros from our next speakers. And Martin?
Hi, sorry. The speed with which the identity can be verified, I think, is critical, particularly in the sort of the mobile space where, you know, we're also our attention span is so short. We need things done in seconds, and it doesn't really matter how complicated things are behind the scenes. As the end user, you know, we expect and want it done instantly. So that's one thing I think we could probably talk about later on. So okay, thanks for the introduction, Steve. Now let's talk to Virginie. I think she's probably in Nice. So we've got Steve in San Diego, we've got me in the UK, we've got Virginie in Nice. You know, as head of traveller identification at Amadeus, it's quite a nice role for you to have. So maybe just, Virginie, just sort of tell us what it is that you do in terms of you know, digital identity verification, and also what, you know, just give us an idea about how it fits into the, you know, the bigger Amadeus picture, if you could.
Of course. Hi, Martin. To be frank, I'm actually sitting in Madrid right now.
Not my mistake.
I flew yesterday, so you're completely forgiven.
Okay.
Yeah. I joined Amadeus about 3 years ago. My background is more about finance and strategy consulting, working with high-tech sectors like aerospace and defense, where this problematic, was initiated. I remember the growth of all the security bubbles and crowd supervision for a number of events, etc. So the defense industry as such was quite a pioneer on these matters, and we see it spreading today in the digital economy. And for Amadeus, it's quite a transversal topic. As you mentioned earlier, we are not only a GDS, but also an IT provider for a number of verticals, as we call them: airports, airlines, rail, car rental companies, insurance even. And so for us, this traveler identity is absolutely crucial and transversal, and we see a lot of value in there that we can generate for our clients along the traveler journey. The way we articulated this initiative internally, traveler identification, is first on the industry front. We attend to a number of industry initiatives. IATA One ID is one of them. It's about facilitating PAX processing at the airport. We also consult with the World Economic Forum. We attended to the Security in Travel work group, and as such provided a number of inputs for their white paper issued by Accenture. And there is also an innovation part of this traveler identification initiative, which we tend to focus a lot on privacy. We try and experiment all these new technologies, distributed ledgers, all sorts of authentication mechanisms with the traveler's privacy in mind, not only for the GDPR, but because we see it as a heavy trend in ethics, even in regions where it may not be at the top priority right now. So that's a key focus, and also what we call transformational innovation, because we can see that with, as you mentioned earlier, there is a digital transformation going on, which traveler identification is a natural a part of. And beyond that, we see the necessity to create incentives for all the stakeholders and the traveler, for them to share data and make sure every step of the journey is a win-win for them. And finally, there is, of course, a business aspect to it, which is, of course, about addressing our clients' requirements in the matter, but also imagine beyond that how we can help them to think beyond their own silo. As we mentioned, because we are across all these verticals, we think we can bring special value in bridging all these verticals and enabling all form of industry coordination around this traveler identification. And also part of this business side of things is the necessity for us to grow our ecosystem of partners, also a fundamental aspect of the digital transformation.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, there's a lot. You rattled through a lot there from the office in Madrid, not in Nice. The whole sort of privacy thing is probably something we might get onto later. And also, I just think that the interesting about the sharing of data. I mean, one's digital identity is data, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that people are willing to share their data in exchange for benefits. So one thing maybe we could talk about later was what the benefits of a digital identity might be. So thanks, Virginie, for that. Okay, so now let's hear what Rajiv Kaul has got to say. Rajiv is he's joining us today because he's I don't know if he's leading Accenture's involvement with the World Economic Forum's Known Traveller, but he's certainly towards the top of the list. So Rajiv, maybe if you could just on the off chance that people don't know what Known Traveller is, maybe just sort of explain what it is and the thinking behind why Accenture and the other travel industry partners are involved in this. I think Marriott is. I know Amadeus is. There's even a soundbite from Google in the document. So there are, as Virginie mentioned, there is that industry collaboration around identity verification. But just give us a brief overview of Known Traveller, if you could, please.
Absolutely, Martin. Thanks. And we're going to come back to the other side of the pond here. I'm out here in Washington, D.C. So my name is Rajiv Kaul. I'm a managing director here from Accenture Technology. And I've been with Accenture about 15 years, and I'm what we refer to as a master technology architect. So what that is, what I do is focus on, delivering emerging technologies to our large travel clients, specifically, to keep pace with the digital natives. So as Martin, as you mentioned, right over this past year, we partnered with the World Economic Forum, and it was about 20 or so of their member organizations. So this includes governments and companies. And you did mention a few, right? Amadeus was part of this working group, the US, Canada, Interpol, Marriott, Google, many companies involved in this. And we came up with this concept called the known traveler digital identity. And the problem we were looking to solve was simply that the research is showing that there's going to be about a 50% growth of international border crossing by air by 2030. And the current technology, infrastructure, and public policy, it just simply can't support that. We see long lines even today. So imagine with the 50% growth, we're going to be seeing not only impact to the travel and tourism industry, but also other economic impacts that rely on folks crossing borders as part of business. So the intervention concepts at KTDI leverages three main pillars. So the first is the notion that you actually own your digital identity. So you decide who uses it, when, you decide who uses it for what. So if you want to share your identity with immigration, with any other party on the travel journey, with a hotel, you can do that. But the key is that you own your identity. You have it in your own digital wallet. The second piece is the biometrics. So using biometrics to actually verify the individual against the identity that was shared. So biometrics is already widely used, widely adopted, used by many of the over 10 trusted traveler programs that we have today. The challenge is that they're all a bit fragmented. And, for example, they require the traveler to register multiple times across the different programs that we have, Global Entry, Nexus, etc. But it has been clearly proven that biometrics-based verification is more accurate than human-based verification. It's quite amazing, actually. And then finally, the third important part is blockchain. So we are leveraging the blockchain to establish a level of trust between the various entities. Steve earlier talked about trust. That's a big portion of this concept here. In other words, if I'm verifying a traveler coming to the US, Martin, let's say you're coming to the US, I can see what other countries have attested to your ID and have cleared you, right? So each one of those attestations is being placed on the blockchain. And this is a key component of someone being a, quote unquote, known traveler, right? More digital stamps, more attestations. Martin, now you have become more known to this ecosystem, and I'm more likely to grant you the expedited access and pre-cleared. So in the World Economic Forum, something which is unusual for them. So we actually built a prototype and demonstrated it at their annual meeting in Davos a few weeks ago, with actually Canada, the Netherlands, and Marriott International all committing to subsequent pilots of this, which everyone is very, very excited about. To get that's the type of thing I think that really gets the momentum going. And then there's some great articles written on KTDI by you guys at T News and others. I think that have done a great job covering it. So
okay, great. So thank you for the saying that we covered it quite well. It's good. It's good to know that the guy in charge likes what we're doing. Always helps. So maybe we could have another poll at this stage. So just having heard Rajiv, talk through sort of like the top line aims and objectives of known traveler digital identification, just wondering, what the audience thinks in terms of its adoption and, so the question that Nick I would like to think we'll be pulling up shortly is, when do you think that seamless borderless travel, helped by initiatives such as Known Traveller, will become widely adopted on key routes at least? So the idea of the attestation, the digital identity being shared among various border agencies to allow me expedited access to countries, that sort of thing that Rajiv was talking about. Do you think it's, you as the audience, do you think it's likely to be within 5 years, 5 to 10 years, or 10 years plus? And this is sort of on key routes, so we're not key routes, so we're not talking about mass global adoption. It's just the specific city pairs, the most important city pairs. So okay, are the results ready to come up? Yeah, let's have a look. Okay, so it's fairly well balanced between within 5 to 10 years, 46% within 5 years, 42% 5 to 10 years, and 13% think it's going to take longer than 10. So Rajiv, what's your initial response to that?
I'm glad to see that. I will be I'm really hopeful, especially with Canada and the Netherlands, especially agreeing to pilot, that we can get this within 5 years. I'll be surprised if we're not. I think widely adopted could be used, it could be interpreted a few different ways, but I really do think that within 5 years, we are going to see KTDI, other Known Traveller, other biometric solutions, quite pervasive out there.
Okay, well, great. Thanks for that, and thanks everyone for helping us out on the polls. That's great. I know I said that we've got questions coming through, and we've had a few already, and I'm just wondering if this might be something you'd all like to just sort of chip in. The question says, where do you see various decentralized ID initiatives, such as Identity Foundation, and where will they play in digital ID for travel? So I'm just wondering, Known Traveller is a very specific initiative. I know IATA's got One ID. I mean, are there other digital ID initiatives out there, and will there be one ID for all, or will there be a room for different manifestations of that?
I can take a quick stab at this, Martin. So we have one program. We have an interesting program called ID 2020. For those of you that may have heard of it, is something actually we're doing with the UN HCR around refugees, around actually giving IDs to refugees. There's over 1 billion plus refugees in the world that really, if we're today relying on passports and cards as identification, how do we actually get into a place where people are more than just these cards? They are they are themselves, and using the same concepts that I talked about for KTDI, which is around you own your identity. We have biometrics. We need this level of trust between the entities, but now we can introduce things like vaccinations and diplomas and other aspects of an identity and make that as digital as possible. So whether or not there is one identity that's sort of digital wallet that's used for everything around the world, I think that remains to be seen. You need a lot of buy-in for that, but we certainly are headed in the direction of digital identity in various aspects.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks for responding to that. Okay. So, having had a sort of introduction of the panelists, we've got some questions that we've prepared. So, we talked initially about digital identity verification and its role within digital transformation, and how, because the travel industry is fairly well advanced in its digital transformation, we're now moving towards sort of mobile transformation. So I'm just wondering, to the panelists, how can digital identity verification or mobile identity verification help speed up the digital transformation of individual travel businesses, or is it more about individual travel sectors or traveling itself? So Steve, I mean, in terms of sort of like the use cases around travel, I mean, how is digital identification helping digital transformation?
Excellent question, Martin. I think about it from the perspective of the traveler. So if you let's take a international traveler's journey. Along the way, there are plenty of opportunities for Mitek's technology to make that a better experience. So let's start with the morning of the trip. So let's say you're hailing a ride from an Uber or Lyft or other ride-sharing application. It's very likely that the driver has gone through some digital identity verification process to prove that they are the driver who's picking you up. I could see in the future there being more requirements for the safety of the driver for the person taking the ride to also complete this step. Once you get to the airport, there's a check-in process. Perhaps the night before, you have completed an identity verification transaction by scanning your passport or your other identity document. So when you do get to the airport to check in, you've already done some of the steps. You might be able to go to a self-service kiosk and skip a line. Once you're at your destination, let's say you're renting a car when you get where you're going. Renting a car ahead of that, you can do an identity verification so you can seamlessly pick up your vehicle and they know that it is, in fact, you who's getting that car. There may be additional steps at the point of getting the keys as well in the future as cars become a little bit more connected, where you've just proven your identity on the mobile device and now the car has unlocked itself. When you get to the hotel, if you've chosen to stay in a hotel, there's a check-in process where the hotel likely needs to verify your identity. Many countries require passport on file. Some countries even require reporting data about that traveler. Maybe you've also decided to add some leisure on your trip and you stay at a place from Airbnb or a HomeAway or a VRBO, one of these sharing economy rental sites. You'll likely need to prove your identity there. So the person who is renting this place to you knows that it is in fact you, and that host has likely also gone through an identity verification step, likely through a mobile or digital, so you can feel confident that the place that you're renting actually belongs to that person. So lots of different opportunities that I would expect to see in the coming years, each of those stages in a traveler's journey having an identity verification process.
Okay. Might sort of just chip in with another sort of question from the floor. I mean, the you know, your presence in financial services is a question that seems to suggest that financial institutions are happy with that because of the Know Your Customer, which we can talk about or not, the Know Your Customer initiative in financial services. But I'm just wondering what sort of level of interest are you seeing from travel companies in this? I mean, are they looking to adopt it more now, or as a almost to generate new business use cases, or is it a way of just optimizing existing processes?
Happy to take that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Amadeus is everywhere, as we know, so that would be quite a nice broad question for you to chip in on, Virginie. Thank you.
It's interesting you spoke about finance, because when you think about it, the KYC procedures today are extremely costly for banks and can be deterrent for the onboarding. I heard it's about $15 to $20 to actually KYC a regular customer, not to mention the hard cases. And what we see now more and more is this coming to travel in the form, pretty much the same form actually. There are already a number of visa waiver schemes existing, and it's more and more about pre-check, vetting, etc. So we see this really imposing itself on the what you call the travel companies, actually more as a requirement. But then from this requirement, it's really up to them to leverage this as an opportunity too, because there are really three dimensions there. Like Rajiv mentioned, there is a dimension of travel growth where we have to generate more efficiency. There is a dimension for governmental security and immigration and the necessity to better control the flow. And there is also something around the digital economy and the capacity to enable more digital services around the traveler. So when you think about it, also right now it's still a bit fragmented and the requirements differs from a region to the other. It's actually an opportunity for travel stakeholders to get past this pain of onboarding, vetting the customer, etc., spreading the cost across the whole chain, and eventually unlock adjacent business opportunities.
Okay, yeah, That makes sense. So Rajiv, I mean, I talked about whether digital identification is helping traveling itself, and you known traveler is very much around make it seamless and secure travel. But beyond the seamless and secureness of sort of border control, I mean, what is known traveler doing earlier on in the sort of the travel value chain? So I know that one of the on the document that you produced with the World Economic Foundation, you identified, I think it was 16 processes in the value funnel, 5 of which were pain points and 1 of which was booking. The actual booking is one of the top 5 pain points in travel. So I mean, what can known traveler do to make travel easier beyond the obvious, getting through borders and applying for a visa more effectively? What does it do during the rest of the chain?
Sure. So I think one of the keys here, and especially as it comes to booking, is through the booking process. What we can do is we can translate this into pre-screening individuals, right? So if you look at, we've probably all seen many sort of travel journey value chains and maps and all sorts of different manifestations of that. We have one in the paper that we did with the forum, and you can see that it's all a continuum. And if we can start to address some of the steps downstream a little earlier in the process, right? So address something that I'm going to do at step 6, where I may be crossing the border, I may be checking into a hotel. How can I do something right now in step 1 or 2 to help streamline it, right? And that's really key for both removing friction from the process, the travel journey, as well as adding security. And I think a big key here is actually from our concept in KTTI is around the pre-screening of individuals. So through digital identity, the actual bits of identity can be transferred to the verifying party, well in advance. So it arrives them not only to prepare for their arrival. So if I have a VIP guest coming into a hotel, I can prepare for them, but also prepare for their verification, allow them to use facial recognition or fingerprints or something to actually do the check-in and make their way directly to the room. So an example of KTDI, we share identity both during booking as well as anytime before the trip while managing their itinerary. And then again, then it translates into more security and less friction in the process. And then ultimately where we'll get to is a place where we get to move from actual human verification to the human plus machine verification, right? As we introduced AI here. So we get a number of benefits, and we get to really get, we talked about machine-based verification earlier and the results of that. So once we start to introduce machines more into even the pre-screening process, that even makes things even more secure and more seamless.
Okay, that's interesting. You talk about sort of AI and machine learning, because if I recall correctly, Steve, that's something that you were saying was a sort of built into a lot of what Mitek's systems do. So how does that sort of AI and machine learning, play into what you can offer travel suppliers looking for digital identity verification?
Sure. So our use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, is tied to the document verification process itself. Imagine, let's say, a manual reviewer at a security line. They're looking at hundreds of documents a day. They likely don't have training on all of the documents around the world, so there becomes this document review fatigue. There also is just a knowledge gap. And with machine learning technology, we can train our systems and algorithms to classify ranges of documents, and our systems, they don't tire like a person who's standing at a checkpoint. And so that's one part of it, just classifying and knowing what type of document it is. The second part of it is training the system to detect forgeries or tampering or other adjustments that might have changed on the document that may be very hard for a person to see with their eyes. The machine learning algorithms can catch those. When we get into biometrics, doing facial comparison, doing recognition, doing liveness detection. All of these rely heavily on this cutting-edge AI machine learning technology.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So just sort of, as I said, we're just going to take the questions probably from the audience as they come through. I've got a thank you person who filed this saying that the question is badly worded and asking me if I can summarize it. So what I'm doing is I'll try and summarize it. It's just a question around different vendors, different cloud-based vendors. So, you know, if an airline uses Mitek and the bank in the country is using a different vendor and the car rental company is using a different vendor from the bank, I mean, how does that all pan out? Is there a super algorithm that can connect all the systems, or will I'm just wondering, again, not a million miles away from what I asked Rajiv about whether there's going to be one ID for all, whether that's something that Mitek could have a comment on about whether the interoperability, I think, of the different systems is a concern, or whether it's all managed automatically.
Sure. Mitek today does not do a federated identity process, so each of our implementations are unique to the enterprise that's taking them in. Whether or not those connect with each other will depend on the maturity of the market. Of course, Mitek would like to be involved in all of the use cases across the spectrum. But if you take a step back away from technology, each of these players already have a process, whether it's manual or has some automated systems involved. So I don't think it would be too different. I think each of the steps, whether it be the ride-sharing app or an airline or a hotel, they each have a duty for their own business to do a validation, so they should not be reliant on, let's say you're renting a car and your hotel is not going to be reliant on that rental car's identity verification. So I don't see us immediately reaching a place where there's a dependency on that chain. I would think each of the individual participants would be doing their own validation through that process.
Okay, all right. And Virginia, I mean, in terms of the interoperability of the various identity systems out there, I mean, is that something that Amadeus is aware of and looking at?
Totally, and that's completely the sense of our participation to the IATA, contributing to making sure that this traveler identification, as we call it, is persistent, private, governed, and vendor agnostic. That's really the key elements we are pushing through.
Okay, so that's IATA's One ID as a sort of combining the various things. Okay, so just another question for Steve. I mean, we've talked about why digital identity verification is becoming important for travel. We've talked to Rajiv about how it's going to make travel better for the end user. But I mean, what are the direct and indirect benefits for the enterprise involved, for the actual sort of travel supplier? I mean, we've got that it's great for travelers, but I mean, for your sort of travel clients, what benefits are they getting from having sort of digital identity verification done on the mobile in seconds? What's it bringing to their business?
Yeah, it's an important question because ultimately there needs to be a return on investment. So there's a bit of work to integrate these technologies in as part of any transformation and roadmap within one of these organizations. But fortunately, there are multiple factors. Trust is probably the most important one, making sure that as an enterprise, you're doing business with who you think you're doing business with. There's liability concerns, there's safety concerns, so establishing that is very important. Customer experience and convenience are also really important. Nobody wants to continue to do business with an enterprise that is very challenging to do business with, especially in a situation where you're traveling. So through that customer experience, that convenience, you're helping build a little bit of loyalty to your brand. But there's also cost reduction. So some of the manual processes can be replaced with self-service for those that still have a touch from personnel, helping streamline the process so they can focus more on customer service. Ultimately, you see a cost reduction there. And then, of course, related to trust, mitigating fraud, making sure that the travelers within your airline or your hotel have security. There's a lot of fraud around impersonation, and so if someone is traveling under the identity of someone else, and that eventually comes as a chargeback to the enterprise, that certainly hits a bottom line. So that's where some of the additional investment can be seen indirectly.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. You talked, just mentioned in about the trust between the travel supplier and the end user the travelers. A question come through just talking about the security of the documents and the extent to which photographs on a document can be altered, and the extent to which live capture should prevail. I seem to recall that you had quite a clever way of live capturing with when people blinked. Was that correct? And just sort of broadening out a bit in terms of the actual, the confidence in the security of the identity you're verifying. So how do you go about that?
Our mobile SDK, which is embedded in the app, almost like a white label process, has a couple unique characteristics. One, for the document capture, we're able to capture that document live. We don't have the user upload. There's an auto capture process in which we're evaluating each frame as the user is presenting the document, and then we take a snap of that once we've hit the proper image quality measures. For the face, we are leveraging liveness techniques like a blinking interaction, but we also have some passive techniques in the background to make sure that the person is actually in front of the camera and it's not a video replay or another spoof attack. For our Android ecosystem, we also offer an NFC scanning SDK. That's the near field communication, which can be used to pull off the RFID chip data from standard passports and many identity cards. The chip data can also be authenticated. There's a certificate on there that can be processed, so we know that it has not been tampered with. So there are multiple measures where we're seeing a lot of the initial use of this technology is closer in some of the convenience in establishing that initial trust. There's still certainly a process by which, especially in some of the high risk scenarios like the airline travel, where we would still see a physical document review, but it would be augmented with the digital process that has already occurred.
Okay, thanks for that, and I hope that's answered the questioner's concerns. Let's have a look at what else we've got there. So, I mean, I know Virginia talked earlier about sort of GDPR and data privacy. I mean, I'm just thinking, will there be, legislatively, are there sort of laws in the offing around people's identity verification within travel? I mean, Rajiv, you've probably got a hotline to lots of government regulators and legislators. So, without sharing state secrets, I mean, what are people thinking that there needs to be, new laws around this, or is existing legislation, scalable to cover this?
Sure. Well, I think we have existing legislation, and then we have legislation that is about to be in place, such as GDPR. So, we are certainly seeing more and more stringent laws on data privacy. Part of our working group were some governments and agencies such as Interpol from Europe. And this is a big deal. And the intersection of digital identity and data privacy, I think, is sort of where this sweet spot will be that we need to work through. So in the KTDI solution, actually similar to the way that we did our ID 2020 solution as well. So we solved this. This is one of the ways we used blockchain, actually. So I talked earlier about how we used blockchain to create those attestations and storing the digital wallet for Martin when you travel around the world. We actually will store those stamps so you become more trusted. The other thing that we're doing is that we're actually not storing the identity information, right? The profile information, the biometrics on chain. that's actually stored off-chain, and the blockchain actually houses a reference to that actual person's data. And that data would be stored by the sovereign entity. In my case, it would be, United States as being a U.S. citizen. But we're not keeping it on the chain itself. And it does a couple things, right? I think one of the concerns generally as blockchain picks up a lot of growth here is its ability to scale and having a lot of data on chain. But I think a big one when it comes to data privacy is, blockchains are typically immutable. And so we can't make changes to that. So if a user requests a destruction of their personal data, such as I believe is a requirement for GDPR, we actually do that on that actual source of data, right? Which is off chain, where you can where it can be destroyed, right? And so we'll be able to meet that GDPR restriction. So that's what we've done on KTDI. But I think we're going to see more and more with this world of more data privacy. If you guys have a chance to look at our Tech Vision, we talk about citizen AI and sort of using AI and the sort of this wealth of data that we have for the greater good, for the broader society. This is something that the data and our view on data privacy is going to continue to grow. So as all of us work in this digital identity space grows with those data privacy restrictions, we need to keep that in mind, such as the approach that we took on KTDI. Okay, thanks. That's quite clear. So got another question. Same guy asking me to interpret his question. So just why is this technology being widely adopted? It all seems sort of relatively straightforward. I mean, MyTech can take a picture of my passport and a selfie and authenticate it in seconds. I mean, why isn't this technology being more widely adopted, do you think, Steve?
I actually feel like it's growing in adoption. It may be hard to see as the whole system is not changing all at once, but we're seeing more and more activity in this area. We're seeing pilots. We're seeing new launches. I think what it'll take is a tipping point in which everyone has gone through this experience once, and then it'll just be a just matter of everyday life. So if we look about Mobile Deposit, which is our other flagship product, it took some time before everyone knew the convenience that it existed, and then once it became part of the process, I don't meet too many people who receive checks that haven't experienced a mobile deposit. I would say within a few years, if not before then, it'll be hard to find someone who hasn't gone through a digital identity verification step. So there is a transformation. It does take time, though. There are lots of updates that have to happen, not just in the mobile apps, but also back-end capabilities. And those take investments. Those take contracts to be forged and work to get done. So we'll see it continue to take off. Okay. I mean, yeah. I mean, I know Teen News has been around for 10 years. I mean, I think we've all been in the business longer than that. I mean, it was 20 years ago, people thought it would be ridiculous if you would buy a flight on a telephone. And now, look, we're all doing it. So I think these things do take time, and we sometimes get a bit, our attention span becomes a bit short. And if something hasn't gone viral, as it were, we think it's not going to work. But I think with digital identity verification, as Steve and Rajiv and Virginie saying, it's starting to happen, and will only get more dominant and prevalent in travel. So maybe just I've got 5 minutes or so left. Maybe just a sort of quick question around the specifics of mobile. I know Virginie, maybe from Amadeus, has always been quite strong on mobile. So I mean, is mobile really sort of leading the way in terms of traveller identification? Would we? I mean, it's silly to ask whether we'd be having these questions if mobiles weren't around. But I mean, how important is the widespread availability of mobile devices in terms of driving the innovation around digital identity verification? Hello?
Apologies, I was on mute.
Okay.
So I guess Yeah, for mobile, obviously the adoption is growing. Now we probably need to differentiate across the different touch points. It's certainly growing in popularity for check-in, for example. For border control, as far as I know, we don't even speak about it. And I read recently a result showing that for travel bookings and search, actually, even in Asia, where people are quite keen on mobile, they still prefer the large screens and laptops. So you see the landscape is quite diverse, but down the line, of course, for all the booking flow at least, and the passenger processing, from the comfort of his home to his final destination or his Uber, we do believe in widespread use of mobile. And to be frank, given the current state of the technology, it's really just a matter of usage. We certainly believe that virtually there is no need for physical touch points anymore, even at the border. The technology is there. It's just a matter of convergence and usage.
Yeah. I mean that's a common observation from the technology is ahead of the legislation. So the technology's there. It's just other sort of macro political concerns that are stopping this from happening. Okay, well, we're getting pretty close to the end of the hour. So maybe Steve, do you just want to sort of wrap it up from a MyTech perspective? I mean, I know you wanted to us to sort of arrange this so that we could just shoot the breeze generally about digital identity verification in travel, and I think we've covered quite a bit today. So I mean, just is there one thing that you're sort of going to take away from this?
Yes, I appreciate everyone spending the time with us to listen in. I know it can be a little bit difficult not having slides or visuals, but we are definitely interested in speaking with you. If you have use cases that fit within travel, you can reach out to us, of course, directly through our website, mytechsystems.com, and certainly please share this recorded webinar as it comes out with others that you feel may be interested on this topic. This is a growing industry, the identity verification. It's evolving quickly, so please continue to stay in touch with us.
Okay, and then Rajiv, do you want to have a nice round? The pressure is on. The pressure is on you, Rajiv, to round it all up.
Right. So the pressure's on, but I'm really excited to see the response to that earlier poll question that says that within 5 years we should have wide adoption. What that means is that we talked about data privacy earlier. That means that folks, at least 40 to 50% of the folks on this webinar that participate in the poll are willing to participate in whatever it takes from a data privacy perspective to enable that. So that's great to hear. We're going to do everything we can, working with our member companies, folks like Amadeus and MyTech here, to really get this, get the data privacy, the biometrics, the whole known travel of digital identity in place, and really get into a place and talk about mobile. Really come when we get to 2030. Really all this technology will start to fade into the background and everything becomes really people-centric, right? So that's really what we're anticipating happens here. So we won't even see these fingerprint scanners and mobile phones and other cameras and other types of equipment. It'll all just fade to the back, and we'll enjoy both more seamless as well as much more secure travel.
Well, that's what we all want, isn't it? And also easier booking. All right. Well, listen. Thanks everybody that's made the effort to join us today. We've had very few dropouts, which is really good. So most people that start to listen are still here. So thank you very much for that. Thanks again to Virginie, Steve, and Rajiv. Really interesting discussion. We've covered quite a lot in an hour. It seems like longer than an hour, but maybe that just reflects the intelligence of the conversation that we've had. So once again, thanks to the panelists. Thanks everybody for joining. There'll be an email follow-up coming to you all soon. And yeah, thank you very much. Good night or good evening. Good evening or good morning even, Steve. Sorry. Good morning. Talk to you all later. Bye.
Bye.